Okay, so today we're going to go over cylinders, cones, and spheres. So the first thing we're going to talk about are cones, what exactly are cones, and how to find the surface area. So let's start with cones. Cones are three-dimensional figures, solid figures, that have a flat circular base and a curved lateral surface that meets at a point. Known as the apex. So let's draw out a cone, and we're going to talk about very specific things that we need from said cone. So remember from before, the dotted line is behind the figure and you can't see it, and the front line is, or the dark lines, are the ones that you see from the front of the figure. This is our apex. There are two things you need to know about this figure. It has a height, like a figure height. That's your height. And then it has a slant height, which will be labeled as L. We also need to know the radius. So basically you need the height, the slant height, and the radius. But for surface area, you just need the radius and the slant height. There are more than one type of cone. We're going to talk about kind of two of them, but then we're going to talk about mainly right ones. So let's talk about right cones. Right cones have the apex directly over the center of the base. An example would be our figure up here. That is a right one because the apex is directly over the center. Same thing here. This is the apex is directly over the center of the base at 90 degrees. So this is a right cone. And then the last one we're going to talk about is the oblique cone. The oblique cone. And the apex is not directly over the center. It kind of looks like this. Now, do they all look like this? No. But the apex is not directly over the center. So this is our oblique cone. So it kind of meets off to the side. Again, what we need is the slant height and the radius to find our surface area. So the surface area is going to be the following equation, which is pi times the radius squared plus pi r times the slant height. And also the net of a cone will be as follows. We always start with our base for the net. Then we have a curved section around it. It depends on the size of the cone. Sometimes it'll look like this. Well, that is a really bad drawing, but sometimes your cone will look like this. If it goes out too far, it'll look like that. And sometimes your cone will look like this. So this is what the net of a cone would look like. This would be your slant height. This would be your slant height. Now, do we need to use the net to find the surface area of our cone? Nah, we can just use this information that we have. As long as we know what the slant height is and the radius, we can find our surface area. So I'm going to pull out a note sheet. If you guys do not have the note sheet, I understand. I didn't necessarily put it on Schoology, but if you have questions, let me know. We're going to use these. We're going to start on number 1. I don't care about the net of the solid because, again, we know it's going to be like this. Like this. Again, the slant height is going to be 18.8. That's the side of our slant. And the radius of our circle is 8. That's all you have to do for the first two is just sketch the way it looks. Let's look at number 2. Again, we have another cone, so we're going to use the same net. It's going to look like this. The diameter this time is 6. And our slant height is 11.4. So this line right here is going to be 11.4 because it is directly cut along the slant. Now, let's look at number 3. We're actually going to find the surface area of this figure. So the surface area is the following formula, as you remember. It is pi times the radius squared. That is the area of our base. And then the lateral surface, or the curved section right here, is the following formula. Pi times the radius times the slant height. The radius is half of our diameter. Well, we know the diameter is 22, so our radius is going to be 11. And our slant height is 24.6. We're going to plug that into our formula. We're going to do pi times our radius, which we know is 11 squared, plus pi times 11 times 24.6. All I'm going to do is type that into my calculator to get the answer. So I'm going to start off with pi times 11 squared plus pi times 11 times 24.6. So pi times 11 times 24.6. So it gives me 1,230.2. So the surface area is going to be about 1,230.2 yards squared. Let's look at number 4, same situation. We're going to start there. Again, our slant height is 20.1 and our radius is 9. That's all we need to know in order to find our surface area. We're going to use the same formula. Pi times the radius squared. Again, that is our base, plus our lateral surface, which is going to be pi, times our radius, which is 9, times, oh, I forgot to write this, pi times the radius times the slant. Whoop. Give me 1 second. Pi times 9 times 20.1. Again, I'm going to type that into my calculator to get the answer. We're going to do pi times 9 squared plus pi times 9 times 20.1. And that'll give me 822.8 inches squared. Remember, if it is surface area, it is inches squared. It's units squared for those. Now let's move on to cylinders. Cylinders are a little bit different. Let's talk about what exactly is a cylinder. So we're going to move on to back to our vocabulary sheet. For cylinders, let's start here. Cylinders are solid three-dimensional figures with two flat, circular, or elliptical bases and a curved lateral surface. So this is going to be my cylinder. So this is our curved lateral surface and it has two circular bases. So for this one, we only need the radius and the height. The height is the distance from here to here. If I were to draw you a net of this figure, again, we're going to go back to the other sheet as soon as you guys get this written down. We're going to go back to draw our net. Let's look at number 5. It says sketch the net of the solid and label the measurements given. So the net of a cylinder is going to look as follows. Let me pull out the sheet. We're going to start with the base. The base is a circle. Then we're going to show the middle section. Now the middle section of a cylinder is just a rectangle that curves all the way around. So kind of like this. And then we have another base, which will be on the other side. This is the net of my cylinder. Again, it is just a rectangle wrapped around 2 circles. So we're going to label this one. We know our diameter is 6, so I'm just going to label my diameter as being 6. And the height of the figure comes from this side, so this is going to be 8. Looking at number 6, same situation. We're going to start by drawing the net of our figure. We have a circular base and a rectangle lateral surface is what it will be. And then we have another circle for a base. The radius of my circle is 4. And the height of my rectangle, which is disproportionate, but it's fine, is 18. And that is how you would label your net. Now let's talk about how to find the surface area of a cylinder. So the first thing I want to talk about are the bases. So for these 2 bases, we're going to find the surface area of the base, and then we're going to find the lateral surface. So the base is what we're going to start off with. We have 2 bases, so whatever, and they're 2 equal bases. So because of this, we're going to have a pretty number 2 in the front. We have 2 circles, so we need to find the area of a circle. Well, the area of a circle is pi times the radius squared. So for our 2 bases, we know it's going to be pi r squared for 1 base, and we have 2 of them, so we're going to put 2 in front. So 2 pi r squared. Now for the lateral surface. As we drew on our net, we know that the length of this line has to go all the way around my circle. If it goes all the way around my circle, the length is going to have to be the circumference of the circle. So we know a rectangle is length times height. Length times width. But we know our length is going to be the circumference. So to find the circumference, we're going to do 2 pi times the radius. That is our circumference formula. And the width of our rectangle is the height. So to find the lateral surface is 2 pi r times height. Make sure you write down this formula, surface area of a cylinder. Now let's look at 2 examples of this, and then we'll talk about spheres last. So looking at number 7 on our note sheet, if you guys don't have the note sheet, please write down the example, draw it, I don't care, whatever. So we're going to start with this one. We know our radius is 8, and our height is 4. We're going to plug it into our surface area formula, which is 2 times pi r squared, plus, again, this is our bases. And we also have 2 pi times the radius times the height. The circumference times the height to get our lateral surface. We're going to plug each of these numbers into our formula. 2 times pi times our radius, which we know is 8, plus 2 times pi times 8 times our height, which is 4. Again, we're going to just type that into our calculator to get our answer. Make sure whenever you guys are working on this question, you write each of these in. I want you to write the formula and your plugging in, and then you can write the answer last. But I need to see your steps. I want to know what you did. So we're going to do 2 times pi times 8 squared plus 2 times pi times 8 times 4. It gives me 603.2 meters squared. Same thing with number 8. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to start there. This time we only have our diameter. We know the diameter is 6, but the radius is half the diameter. So we're just going to take that diameter and divide it by 2. Our answer is going to be 3. So our radius is 3, and our height is 6. Our height is 6. So now we're going to plug it into the surface area formula. Again, we're going to write it for this question. It's going to be 2 pi r squared plus 2 pi times our radius times our height. Our radius is 3, so we're going to plug that in. 2 pi times 3 squared plus 2 pi times 3 times our height, which is 6. Again, I'm going to just type that into my calculator. 2 pi times 9, because that's 3 squared, plus 2 pi times 18. That gives me 169.6 inches squared. And last but not least, we're going to talk about spheres. Let's talk about spheres. We are not going to draw the net of a sphere because it just looks like a beach ball cut up and it gets kind of confusing and you won't be able to use it to find surface area. There's just one specific formula. Let's talk about a sphere first. It is a solid 3D figure where all points are equidistant from the center of the figure. And let's draw a little example. I start with a circle, then I draw a line to show dimension. Remember, the dotted lines are behind the figure. So for this one, again, the radius is from the center to the lateral surface. That is our radius. That is all we know about a cylinder. To find the surface area of a cylinder, again, so this is kind of what the net would look like, but you guys don't necessarily need to know what the net would look like. It looks like all the portions of a beach ball cut apart and laid flat. And they're all touching. So this is kind of what the net would look like. It would keep going. I'm going to stop here. That's kind of what the net would look like. Anyway, so the surface area is the following formula. 4 pi r squared. That is how you find the surface area of a sphere. We're going to do 2 examples of a sphere. And if you guys have any questions on your work, let me know. So let's look at number 9. So our radius is 8.7. We're going to use the surface area formula for a sphere. Surface area is 4 pi r squared. So we're going to do 4 times pi times 8.7 squared. I'm going to take my calculator. I'm going to type that in. 4 pi times 8.7 squared. It gives me 951.1 miles squared. That is the surface area of this figure. And we're going to do one more. Well, let's do 2 more. Let's do these 2. Our radius is 7. We're going to use the surface area formula. 4 pi r squared. So we're going to do 4 times pi times 7 squared. If I multiply that in my calculator, that gives me 615.8 meters squared. That is my surface area. Let's look at number 11. So we have our diameter, which is 14.6. Half of that is your radius. Well, half of 14.6 is going to be 7.3. Now that we have our radius, we're going to use our surface area formula, which is 4 pi times the radius squared. So we're going to do 4 times pi times 7.3 squared, which gives me 669.7 yards squared. And the last one, our radius is 4. We're going to do 4 pi r squared to find our surface area. We're going to do 4 times pi times 4 squared. If I were to multiply all these together, it gives me 201.1 feet squared. And that is how you find the surface area of cones, cylinders, and spheres. If you have any questions, message me on Schoology. Thank you and have a wonderful day.